Hi, I'm Duncan Gowdy, and welcome to Craft Boston Holiday Online from my studio in central Massachusetts. I'm going to show you my gallery, some carving projects that I'm working on, and I'll also be doing a finishing demo. My studio was built about 8 years ago by a company called Bensonwood Homes up in Walpole, New Hampshire, and I was fortunate enough to work with them, in addition to having worked for them for about 6 years, so I know a lot about what went on into the studio. I also talked to a bunch of my friends who had built studios or repurposed a barn, and I also talked to Fabio Fernandez, the former executive director of the Society of Arts and Crafts, about his recommendations. And one of his recommendations was to have the gallery space. So let's start off with the gallery space. Here we go. This is my gallery space. The work that's included in here is included on my profile page of Craft Boston Holiday Line. And I will just give you a quick spin around to show you the work. The carved work that I do is one of a kind, and the object-inspired work is limited production. And now we'll go into the next room and I will show you my carving process. My bench room is where I do most of my drawing, carving, painting, setting hardware, pretty much anything that might be finicky. My ideas are sparked from photographs that I take. When I have an image that I like, I'll print it out, tack it up on the wall. I find this helps me keep ideas in sight rather than closed up in a sketchbook. I also gather up photos of things that I like from Asian pottery and prints, or objects that I might find in antique stores. I'll just take quick photographs and kind of record them and put them up on my wall. Here's a photograph that I took of a large bowl that I was cleaning in the sink. And I liked the image, so I just took a snapshot of it. This photo is for a platter that I'm currently working on. The photo was projected onto a blank platter, and then I outlined the image using a pencil from what I would carve from. If the image is detailed like this one, all the carving is done with gouges. But if I have wide or large areas that need to be ground out, I will use a small grinder, and here's an example of that process. To keep the transitions of the carving flowing, I have gouges with different profiles. So depending on what image I'm carving, I might use between 10 to 20 different gouges. My goal is to carve so that the grain is flowing through the carvings, and the grain will be highlighted in the final finishing process. Because I don't sand after I've done the carving, I have to make sure that my gouges are sharp. And any nick that might be in the gouge would be visible when I put the stain on, so I have to really keep track of what's going on. My staining process is a combination of my art background, particularly the use of watercolors. Another influence is scrimshaw, where the image was engraved on the whalebone, then the engraved areas were filled with ink. So this platter is kind of a variation on the scrimshaw. I've prepared a finished sample by bleaching and pickle staining the ash. By pickle staining, it creates a white field similar to watercolor paper, canvas, or even the whalebone. The pickle stain also seals the wood, preventing any of the colored stain from running. The stain that I use is Lawrence McFadden Wipe-On Gel Stain. I like it because it's thick, which means that I can control it well when I'm brushing it in the carvings. I start off with brown stain to create warmer tones in future applications of the black. I have to make sure that the stain goes into all of the pores because that helps highlight the grain. And the stain is fairly thick so that I can have better control over it when I'm brushing. I have to make sure that each application of stain dries for a whole day before I go on to the next one. So I've kind of done the other applications ahead of time. And I wipe the excess off using color shapers. It's a silicone tip. It's flexible. And then I wrap it with a rag. And then carefully wipe the excess off. And by doing this, it removes any of the brush strokes and it highlights the open pores of the ash. And as you can see, I've gone over the line. So I have a little trick for so-called erasing those mistakes. I get another color shaper with a rag, dip it in mineral spirits, and then just pick it up. Of all the processes for making a piece, I think the staining is my favorite. Just because it's quiet and I know when things are done. So that's the brown. And then I can start showing you how it builds up in the next form. So this one's already been applied with brown stain, and I will start putting black stain on. And I have to keep track of how many applications I put on so that everything is consistent throughout the piece. Some days I can do the staining for each image in a day. Sometimes I split it up if it's a larger piece, so I just have to keep track of where I've left off. And yes, I do go through a lot of tiny rags. Just have to make sure they're clean so I don't have smudges everywhere. These ovals are going by fairly quickly. If I'm staining thin areas such as the platter with branches or pine needles, it really slows things down. Because I have to be extra careful. Okay, so that's the brown and the black, and then this one right here is has had brown stain, black stain, and I will do a second black stain on top of that one. Doing test finish samples like this is good because then I can have a visual of how I want a piece to look. You know, whether I want it, the image lighter or darker. So the importance of consistent carving in that process is important when I'm finishing or doing this painting, because if there was a lot of texture, then some of the grain would come off faster on the higher ridges of that carving. Okay, so that's the 3 applications, and I've pre-done the last 3. So here's the completed finished sample, showing you the gradation depending on how many applications of stain there are. The final oval on the right has 5 applications of the black stain. So there are varying amounts that you can see the grain depending on how dark the stain is. Thank you for spending the time with me today here in my studio. Enjoy the rest of Craft Boston Holiday Online.